We're now joined by Roger Stone. Roger, I'm sure that, you're familiar with this. You've been dealing with liberal politics for a long time. They cannot cover the litany of news. They cannot cover the truth because, well, if they did, it would show you how spineless and how agenda-driven they really are.
Well, look, this has nothing to do with public safety. It has nothing to do with the murders that we've experienced. It is part of the left's agenda to disarm us so that we cannot resist the oppression that they have planned. This is the plan of the globalists. It's the plan of big government. We have the lessons of history, the fact that all of the brutal dictators, Hitler, Stalin, Mao, others, the first thing they did was to disarm the populace. That way there can be no armed resistance to tyranny. That's what their real agenda is. They dress it up in concern for those poor individuals murdered at the hands of a madman, but they can't deal with the narrative that if you take guns away from the average citizens, then only outlaws will have guns. They can't refute that.
But wait a second, Roger. Trump is Hitler. Trump is Stalin, so we should just give him all of our guns. Oh my gosh, Donald Trump can checkmate the left and come out and say, hand all my guns in. What do you think they would do?
Or they'd go out of their minds.
Oh my gosh, I just realized it. Donald Trump has to come out and say, turn all of your guns in, and then the left will say he's Hitler, and they'll realize, wait a second, we can't give our guns to the government.
I'm Roger Stone, and you're at the War Room. We're broadcasting today from a undisclosed location in sunny South Florida, and the mainstream media narrative now seeking to deify Senator Bob Corker of Tennessee because of his anti-Trump stances in his tweets and media appearances ignores the entire real backstory of what's going on. You see, by his vicious attacks on Trump, Senator Corker is currying favor with Robert Mueller, the FBI, and the Department of Justice, where they have been digging deeply into his financial gains and maneuvers as a U.S. senator. They are not only looking at a real estate investment trust in Chattanooga, where he pocketed tens of millions of dollars, where they have looked into whether his trades may have been based on insider information acquired as a member of the U.S. Senate. Both the FBI and the SEC have been boring down on the good senator from Tennessee for a number of years. The Wall Street Journal first determined wide discrepancies and omissions from his financial disclosure documents filed with the U.S. Senate require him to restate and revealing tens of millions of dollars that he had conveniently omitted. Additionally, they have looked at other vehicles such as the Pointer Fund, which he formed with another U.S. senator, where they again garnered tens of millions by shorting housing stock. Joining with Senator Mark Warner of Virginia, again, Corker and Warner presumably pocketed millions. And then there is the story of Senator Corker and the billionaire Henry Lucan. You see, Corker was on the balls of his ass financially until the billionaire Lucan, a communications magnate, came in and purchased Corker's real estate company. That allowed Corker to be solvent and finance, through a loan to himself, his U.S. Senate victory over Congressman Harold Ford. Had it not been for this bailout from Lucan, it is reasonable to assume that Mr. Corker would never have gotten to the Senate. And that's why Corker has become an errand boy for Lucan in the U.S. Senate, working the FCC for him, and an entire extensive list of uses of political and governmental power to enrich his patron, Mr. Lucan. Then, of course, there is the Wells Fargo connection, where Wells Fargo gave Lucan loans at a very favorable rate at the same time that Mr. Corker was supposed to be regulating Wells Fargo. All of this adds up to the fact that the government had the good senator by the short hairs, and that now he seeks to scramble away from their prosecutorial clutches through this new anti-Trump screed. Some may not remember, but Senator Corker was among those who traveled to Trump Tower to ostensibly audition for the vice presidency, back at a time that speculation that Chris Christie, former Speaker Newt Gingrich, and of course the governor of Indiana, Mike Pence, were all under consideration for VP. Corker told reporters that the presidential nominee presumptive, Donald J. Trump, had invited him to Trump Tower, presumably for an audition for the VP slot. It can now be revealed exclusively on InfoWars that it was the good senator who asked for the meeting with Trump, that the candidate was unimpressed and briefed about the legal difficulties and ethical questions swirling around the Tennessee senator. But Trump, in a gesture of goodwill, told Corker, if you want to go downstairs and tell the press you're under consideration for vice president, I won't disagree publicly. I won't rebuke you. So go ahead, have fun. Indeed, Mr. Corker was never under consideration, but it is thought that this was a bid to signal the FBI that indeed Corker was under consideration, and therefore his prosecution on these ethical issues was probably not advisable. Generally speaking, the Justice Department stays away from indicting or seeking charges against someone running in an election, and certainly someone who might be vice president would require a high burden of evidence. Nonetheless, that maneuver seemed to have worked. The senator has avoided prosecution thus far. While you're at it, take a moment and go to the Infowars.com store, where you can still get the iconic Clinton rape T-shirt. Now, this image became historic when Alex Jones went public at the end of campaign 2016 and vowed that anyone who was seen wearing the T-shirt and getting on television would get a cash payment from InfoWars. This sparked an extraordinary citizen revolution where literally Alex Jones personally paid out through InfoWars almost $250,000 to patriots who were able to get on national or regional television wearing the rape T-shirt and saying, quite simply, Bill Clinton is a rapist. This part of history is written about in my book, The Making of the President 2016. You can get both the book and this iconic T-shirt that will end up in the Smithsonian only in one place right now, other than the Stone Cold Truth site. And I recommend you go now to Infowars.com to get both your copy of the book and your copy of this iconic shirt. When these sell out, there will be no more. This is a special numbered edition done by Alex Jones, working with the folks at Stone Cold Truth. And when these are done, they are done. I sign them for Info Warriors as I travel around the country, as well as signing copies of The Making of the President 2016. This book will tell you what the real role of InfoWars was, particularly in the nomination phase of the presidential contest. So if you want to help us fight for a free and open press, if you want to help bolster the First Amendment, if you want to stop the kind of censorship that you just saw Mark Dice dicing and slicing, go to the Infowars.com store, back the counter revolution, get your products, whether it is the T-shirt, the book, or Brain Force, one of my favorites, at 50% off, an extraordinary sale. We need your help. We don't have a George Soros writing us giant checks. Go to the store now. and help us in the fight for freedom. So it's great to be here on the War Room. I'm Roger Stone, working with my compatriot Owen Schroyer. And it is interesting the way that Hollywood sometimes seeks to sanitize history. I'm speaking about the new Tom Cruise vehicle, a movie called American Made, which alleges to be the story of Barry Seal. Now, Barry Seal was a swashbuckling 300-pound Louisiana boy who had an ability as a pilot to fly a plane so low that he could evade detection. This made him a very valuable player for both the drug cartels and, of course, the Central Intelligence Agency. And although the government in the Tom Cruise film denies that Seal is an agent for them, in fact, he was principally responsible for flying narcotics, mostly cocaine, into the small town of Mena, Arkansas. There, the drugs, after a payoff from the CIA under George H.W. Bush, after a payoff to Governor Bill Clinton, those drugs were sold in order to illegally finance the Iran-Contra operations after the Congress cut off funding for these adventures abroad by the Reagan administration in the famous Boland Amendment. Now, the truth of it is that when the IRS got onto Seal's case about millions of dollars of income that he'd made from the trafficking of drugs, working for both the cartel and the Central Intelligence Agency, Seal went to Vice President George H.W. Bush, the man in charge of supervising the drug trafficking operation that had been dreamed up by CIA Director William Casey. In fact, Seal told Vice President Bush that if he didn't get the IRS off of his derriere, that Seal would turn over surveillance tape he had of Jeb and George W. Bush bringing a kilo into Opelika Airport in Miami for sale, lucrative sale, in the Miami area. Shortly thereafter, Seal was brutally murdered, most likely on the orders of Colonel Oliver North. At the time that Seal was gunned down, a small slip of paper was found in his wallet that contained the cell phone number, the direct line, pardon me, not cell phone, the direct line, the private line for Vice President George Herbert Walker Bush. The truth about Barry Seal and what really happened in the Mena drug trafficking ring that involves the Vice President William Casey and Governor Bill Clinton can be found in my book, The Bush Crime Family. It is also reprised in my book, The Clintons' War on Women. You see, the Bushes and the Clintons, while they may be in different parties, they are co-conspirators in the crime world. They have profited not only from drug trafficking, but from various charitable scams where they work together to raise millions for relief of the poor people of Haiti, only to have most of that money boosted, as they say, in parts of Connecticut where I come from. Now, you'll not get the truth in the stirring Tom Cruise vehicle. Ironically, this is the second time Hollywood has tried to tell the story of the swashbuckling Barry Seal. Seal was a man who drove an enormous convertible white Cadillac and kept all of his financial records in the trunk. At the time of his death, ledgers were found that showed that Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger had spirited as much as $12 million from the CIA's drug running to a Swiss bank. We also found further proof that Seal was the CIA operative he said he was. So who really killed Barry Seal? The odds are overwhelming that he was murdered on the orders of Vice President George H.W. Bush. Once again, Hollywood lies. We're going to be moving to calls both now and in the next segment. That number is 888-201-2244. That's 888-201-2244. We'll put it up there on Twitter for you now. And feel free to call on any topic, whether it is Russiagate, the myth, the hoax, the fairy tale constructed by the far left, or if you want to know what Special Counsel Robert Mueller is up to, or you're interested in the latest in the fight to protect state legalized marijuana. These are all topics in the news. But whatever your question, feel free to give us a ring. Again, 888-201-2244. After watching Alex Jones the other day, taking phone calls, I was inspired to do more of this here on The War Room. I really think the two-way dialogue from the info warriors and from the citizen journalists, like the one who contacted us today to tell us that Senator Robert Corker has yet another scam that needs to be investigated. After pressuring a major car manufacturer to relocate to Tennessee and having advanced knowledge of the location of the new plant, it appears the senator and his administrative assistant formed a real estate company and quietly brought up all the soon-to-be valuable land around that installation. Now you see why Senator Bob Corker makes Lyndon Johnson look honest. This guy is a swamp creature through and through. He had to be bailed out by Henry Lucan to defeat Harold Ford. Ironically, Harold Ford was an early choice to join the Trump cabinet as Secretary of Transportation. Would have been an excellent choice because Ford is very well liked in both parties as a congenial and constructive legislator. He had an expertise in infrastructure and transportation issues from his time in the House. And of course, he is an African-American Democrat. He would have brought diversity, which the liberals love so very much, to the Trump cabinet. Unfortunately, Jared Kushner helped engineer the appointment of Mitch McConnell's wife, the longest-serving member of the Bush cabinet, whose Chinese family has long-standing ties to the current Chinese Communist government, as Secretary of the Transportation Department under President Donald Trump. Why, you ask, do we have this swamp creature in charge of one of the most important and politically sensitive departments in the Trump administration? Well, why indeed? A question, I suspect, for Mr. Kushner. While you're at it, though, please go to the Infowars.com store, where Brain Force, the only product that makes this very broadcast possible, is 50% off. When you need a jolt of mental energy, clarity, inspiration, I can't say enough about this product. It's popular in the Stone household. I first had it on studio there in Austin, and it blew me away in terms of its ability to allow me to mentally rally for the challenge of an InfoWars show or a debate with your favorite leftist. So believe me, folks, you can help us and help yourself. Go to the Infowars.com store and look at this incredible special today on Brain Force. Stock up. This will not last very long at this discount. I'm your host, Roger Stone, here at the War Room. I had a hard time leaving the pool today for today's broadcast. It is a glorious, glorious day in sunny South Florida. We're going to go to the phones now because I value the two-way dialogue with the info warriors out there, and I find that I learned something as well as trying to impart something. So let's go to the phones. Robert in Washington, you wanted to talk about medicinal marijuana.
How are you doing, Roger?
Great. How about you?
Good. I see you're taking a couple dress tips from Alex. No tie today. A little disappointed.
Well, this is a very specialized thing. There was a tailor who came to this country from Milan. And he was the first one who developed a double-breasted coat which rolls to the second bottom. It's called the 3-roll 2, which is a very specific and fine piece of Italian tailoring. So wearing this very fine blazer, I didn't feel bad about going without a necktie today, but I appreciate your acknowledgement of my sartorial choices. What's your question today, Robert?
Still dapper as ever, Roger. My question is, I recently got onto the whole Alex Jones thing, and one of the biggest things for me was I suffered with depression and was actually able to get off depression meds with some of the products he has. The biggest one I thought was Rainforest for sure. The iodine was a huge help. But I do smoke marijuana. I'm a big advocate for it. I went through family members who have had cancer, died of it, tried to get them to use it, wouldn't do it. Now, with the legalization where I live in Washington, there's no way to actually know what's in the marijuana, where it comes from, and then hearing all that stuff about the tainted marijuana from California, I've actually gotten what I think has been tainted marijuana, and who is going to control that, and how are they going to control what's actually in it? Just like when you buy a soda pop, everything's written on the side, nothing's labeled on these things at all.
Actually, that's not so. The dispensaries who are set up in the states, in the various states, would be responsible. For example, in Colorado, all of the marijuana that is sold is screened for molds because smoking certain molds can be injurious and cause respiratory problems. This is also true now in California and more states. So there are different strains of marijuana for different physical maladies. For example, we know there are specific strains that have been developed to help people, particularly children, who have epilepsy. There are different strains that are used and have been successful in treating PTSD. A terrific piece in Forbes magazine this week about certain strains which have been used to mitigate blinding, debilitating migraine headaches. So as this becomes standardized under state regulation and law, because after all, remember, all of this is also taxed, you also will have growing personal safety, and you'll have more specific choices. If one went to a physician and said that I have depression or low back pain or any other necessary malady, a skilled physician who understands the use of cannabis in their practice can steer you to a strain that would be beneficial. This is medicine that has been around thousands of years longer than big pharma and the foreign substances and chemicals that are being used, particularly the opioids. Where there's no question whatsoever, in my view, that you have far less damage to the public health in the use of cannabis than you have in this opioid epidemic. And interestingly, opioid-related deaths, opioid-related incidents, opioid-related crime, in fact, almost all crime statistics have gone down in the states that have legalized some form of cannabis, now 29 states. Let's go to a call from Lee in Austin. Lee, what's on your mind?
Hey, Roger. I just wanted to ask you about James Comey and the fact that the left have kind of thrown him under the bus. You saw him kind of leak a little bit about Loretta Lynch and the possibility of her implication in some crimes. And is that the fact that he's been kind of thrown on the bus, does that affect Robert Mueller at all, since I'd assumed his first implication in being involved was to protect James Comey, but is his alliance with the deep state, or how does that affect,
well,
I guess, the outcome?
Sure. I think Mr. Mueller is out looking for some other crime. If no other crime by Donald Trump can be trumped up, pardon the expression, the thought is that Mr. Comey could always bear false witness against the president, and that an obstruction of justice charge could be mounted against the president as a foundation for an impeachment trial. The problem of that, of course, is that as the credibility of Mr. Comey crumbles, that becomes less and less likely. First of all, it is indisputable that Mr. Comey was getting coaching from Mr. Mueller for his appearance before the Congress. That's problematic. It is very clear that Mr. Comey perjured himself in his testimony before the House Intelligence Committee regarding the government's mass surveillance of as many as 30,000 Americans, as revealed by the FISA court. I think that the more you look at Comey, the more his obstruction of justice is clear. And then you have Mr. Mueller. Mr. Mueller interviewed for the position of FBI director with President Trump the day after his compadre, Mr. Comey, was canned. And he was passed over. And that constitutes a conflict of interest right there, would give him a motive for revenge against our president. So if Comey's the best witness they have, I think this dog will not hunt. That's my view. Do we have another call on the line?
We got Mike in California who wants to talk about Vegas. Go ahead, Mike. You're on the air with Roger Stone. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, sounds like Mike may have bailed out on us here, Owen.
Yeah, I don't think we got Mike anymore, Roger.
All right. Well, we're not going to worry too much about it. While we're at it, though, you raise a good point, Owen. What is the latest that you hear from Las Vegas? This story seems to be a continuing story, as the mainstream media will not tell us the truth about what they know.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, Roger. I keep getting some stories sent to me, and I know that some of our audience is privy to this. I don't claim to be a financial expert or a expert in the stock market, but multiple anomalies have been brought to my attention via the stock market, via the end of the fiscal quarter, which happens to be the last day of September, right before the Las Vegas massacre happened. So on top of all of the stuff that we're seeing, the questions about security footage, the questions about multiple shooters, where the shooter was, who was Stephen Paddock, what was the motive, these are all the things that are kind of ongoing. On the other side of things, people are starting to look into the financial aspects, some of the anomalies that are looking around the stock market. And so there's kind of some other angles that are cropping up too, as well as why we're being denied any security footage as well. Roger, you got 60 seconds. What are the things on your mind?
Well, I'll tell you what's on my mind right now, and that is a nice, big, cold, extremely dry Tito's martini. It's almost cocktail time. And here in sunny Florida, we're ready to head to the bar. I'm loving these segments on the War Room, Owen, because I think we're getting a chance to break things down in greater detail, such as the corruption of Senator Bob Corker and the fact that he's currying favor with Mueller and the FBI. His attacks on Donald Trump are a tactic meant to suck up to the powers at the DOJ and avoid prosecution. You heard it first here on InfoWars, right here at the War Room. And please, folks, take a second, go to the Infowars.com store, look at some of these specials, particularly Brain Force, my favorite, but help us, help you, help us in the fight for freedom. Victory or death.